And we are back with part 2 of this week's reading of the Messianic Jewish Family Bible True Life Version, TLV, and we're covering Exodus 25 through 40 this week. We just began Exodus 26. We had just done Exodus 25 um, concerning the tabernacle, the ark, the table, and menorah, and now we're discussing the curtains. Which have to be constructed, have to be put together in a specific manner. So we were beginning to talk about the overhangings, and that is in verse 12 of chapter 6. As for the overhanging part that remains of the tent curtains, the half curtain that remains is to hang over the back of the tabernacle, the extra cubit on one side, as well as the cubit on the other side, which remains in the length of the curtains of the tent, is to hang over the sides of the tabernacle on each side to cover it. You are to make a covering for the tent of ram skins, dyed red, and a couple of seal skins above. You are to make the framework of boards for the tabernacle from acacia wood, standing upright. The length of each board is to be 10 cubits by 1.5 cubits wide. There are to be 2 supports in each board, joined one to another. Do this for all the boards of the tabernacle. You are to make 20 boards to the south side of the tabernacle and 40 silver bases underneath the 20 boards. 2 bases go underneath one board for its support and 2 bases under another board for its supports. Likewise, for the second side of the tabernacle on the north side, there are to be 20 boards with their 40 bases of silver. 2 bases go under one board and 2 bases under the next board. For the back part of the tabernacle westward, you are to make 6 boards. Make 2 boards for the corners of the tabernacle on the back side. They are also to be doubled at the bottom and in the same way joined at the top by the first ring. It is to be this way for them both, and they will provide for the 2 corners. So there will be 8 boards with 16 silver bases, 2 bases under each board. Also make crossbeams of acacia wood, 5 for the boards on one side of the tabernacle, 5 for the boards on the other side of the tabernacle, and 5 for the boards on the back part of the tabernacle to the west. The middle crossbeam in the center of the boards will pass through from end to end. Then overlay the boards with gold and make their rings from gold as holders for the crossbeams and overlay the crossbeams with gold. You are to raise up the tabernacle according to the plan which you were shown on the mountain. Make a fine woven linen curtain of blue, purple, and scarlet with cherubim, and it is to be the work of a skillful craftsman. You are to hang it on 4 pillars of acacia overlaid with gold, their hooks being made of gold atop 4 bases of silver. You are to hang the curtains under the clasps and bring the ark within the curtain of the testimony. The parapet will divide for you between the holy place and the Holy of Holies. Then you are to put the atonement cover on the ark of the testimony in the Holy of Holies. You shall set the table outside the curtain and the menorah opposite the table on the side of the tabernacle towards the south. You are to put the table on the north side. For the entrance of the tent, also make a screen of blue, purple, and scarlet, finely twisted linen, the work of a color weaver. You are also to make the screen 5 pillars of acacia and overlay them with gold. Their hooks are to be made of gold, and you are to cast 5 bases of bronze for them. So that is the end of chapter 26. And I'm going to actually discuss a little bit of this before we move on to chapter 27. And there's a little footnote, Hebrews 9, verse 3, referring to the separation and the Holy of Holies. Now, I mentioned a word that you're probably not familiar with, and it is a paraket, and it is spelled Parokhet, and that simply means a dividing curtain in the temple for the Holy of Holies. The other thing I want to address here before we move forward is I keep mentioning cubit, and actually it's an ancient measure. They say about the length of a forearm. However, if you look at everybody, you can't kind of go by that because people's forearms, some have longer arms than others. So typically, a cubit could be about 18 inches or 44 centimeters, and a long cubit could be 21 inches or 52 centimeters. So I just wanted to kind of touch on that because I've been mentioning that word quite often, and we don't really use that type of measurement in today's world. So that's exactly what a cubit, that's what a cubit is, and it's an ancient measurement. So the other thing we were mentioning is putting, how the tabernacle was actually put together. We have three areas, as I mentioned, what is known as the outer court. And in that outer court, we're going to actually get into it. We've actually got two pieces that are placed there, and that is the brazen altar, and some will refer to it as the brazen laver. um, so we will talk about these pieces then as, and what they resemble, and also what they resemble, as related to Yeshua, because this is so very important. And also how we can come to worship using that tabernacle image, and coming into the presence of the Lord, because, as we know with Yeshua, that veil was torn. There's a veil as you go back in now. We have the outer court, and then we go into the holy place. Now, the outer court, before we go into the holy place, just to mention, back in the day, in the days of the Old Testament, and also the New Testament as well, because the practice did um, occur. There was a temple. Um, no one could go into the holy place except for the priest, and was only specific. The high priest was the only one that could go into the Holy of Holies. And believe me, that high priest had to be right with God, had to have his heart right with God, or he could end up being dead if he went into the Holy of Holies and had sin in his heart or anything that was just not right with God. So we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. But just to kind of give you in an introduction to the tabernacle and how it was laid out. So we have again the outer court, which was open to everyone that was bringing their offering, and for the sin offerings and such. So you have the brazen altar where that was done, and then you had the laver where the priests would, they'd wash their hands and feet because it was, when they sacrificed, it was a mess. So they had to actually wash themselves. Um, so, and we'll talk a bit about that as well. And then in the holy place, you had as you went back to the left, you had the menorah, the seven branched menorah. And directly across from that was the table of showbread. And we'll talk about how that was changed weekly, and also in front of that was your altar of incense. And as I said, there is specific ingredients that God gave. It had to be exact. You could not, and we'll actually get into that. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here. You could not um, use strange incense or strange fire, because it had to be precisely the way God instructed. And then you had the Holy of Holies, where the Ark of God was, the Ark of the Covenant. And of course, the Ten Commandments were placed in there, a jar of manna to remind. to remind the children of Israel how God sustained them in the wilderness with manna, fresh manna every day, and then Aaron's budded rod. So we will talk about these things and the pieces and how they are constructed as we continue on. But just kind of gives you gives you an idea of what this may have looked like. And again, for those of you that are on the group, you are going to actually get a picture of it, so you can actually have the actual visual. And for those of you who are listening and are not on the group, we are on Facebook. We're East Penn Valley Christian Center International, and you're welcome to join us on there. So, chapter 27, Altar, Courtyard, Oil. This is God giving instructions yet about all of this. Make the altar of acacia wood 5 cubits long and 5 cubits wide. The altar will be square, and its height is to be 3 cubits. Make horns on the 4 corners of one piece. Overlay it with bronze. You are to make pots for it to take away ashes, along with shovels, basins, forks, and fire pans. Make all the utensils of bronze. Also make a bronze grating net for it, and on the net you are to make 4 bronze rings, and on the 4 corners you are to place it under the ledge around the altar beneath, so that the net may reach halfway up the altar. Make poles for the altar, poles of acacia wood, and overlay them with bronze. Its poles are to be put into the rings on the 2 sides of the altar for carrying it. You are to make it with planks so that it is hollow. As it has been shown to you in the mountain, they are to make it just so. You are also to make a courtyard for the tabernacle. For the south side, there are to be hangings for the courtyard of finely twisted linen, 100 cubits long. There are to be 20 pillars with 20 bronze bases, and the hooks on the pillars, along with their bands, are to be made of silver. Likewise, for the north side in length, there are to be 100-cubit long hangings, 20 pillars, and 20 bronze bases. The hooks of the pillars and their clasps are to be made of silver. Now for the width of the courtyard on the west side, there are to be 50 cubits of hangings, 10 pillars and 10 bases. The width of the courtyard on the east side is to be 50 cubits. The hangings on one side of the gate are to be 15 cubits, with 3 pillars and 3 bases. For the other side, there is also to be 15 cubits of hangings, with 3 pillars and 3 bases. For the gates of the courtyard, there is to be a 20-cubit curtain of blue, purple, scarlet, and finely twisted linen, the work of a color weaver, along with their 4 pillars and their 4 bases. The pillars of the courtyard are to be banded with silver, their hooks of silver, and their bases of bronze all around. The length of the courtyard is to be 100 cubits, and the width 50 throughout. The height is to be 5 cubits, with hangings of finely twisted linen with their bronze bases. All of the articles of the tabernacle for all of the services there, along with all the pegs, including all the pegs of the courtyard, are to be bronze. So then we begin Parashat Tetzaveh at the very end of chapter 27. Also, you are to command Bnei Yisrael, the children of Israel, that they are to bring to you pure olive oil beaten for the light, to cause a lamp to burn continually in the tent of meeting, outside the curtain, which is before the testimony. Aaron and his sons will set it in order to burn from evening to morning before Adonai. It will be a statute forever throughout their generations on behalf of Bnei Israel. So that ends chapter 27. And the footnote here is also Hebrews 9, verses 2 to 5. And I had already touched on that earlier in part 1. Now my counter says 14:45, so I'm going to pause it here and come back with part 3 We're going to come back with chapter 28 of Exodus.